Yehovah is very angry with the shepherds of his flock because they did not lead the people on the ancient paths but scattered them. Notice that this prophecy is from Jeremiah 50, which is about the end-time Babylonians. The shepherds in the USA have led Yehovah's people astray, and their punishment will be severe. My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have led them astray and caused them to roam on the mountains. They wandered over mountain and hill and forgot their own resting place. Whoever found them devoured them. Jeremiah 56-7. Not only is the punishment for the shepherds in end-time Babylon, but also the false prophets. Nevertheless, Yehovah will shepherd and guide his people to his land for their rest. Here is how Yehovah describes this in the land of the end-time Babylonians. Yet their Redeemer is strong. Yehovah Almighty is his name. He will vigorously defend their cause so that he may bring rest to their land, but unrest to those who live in Babylon. A sword against the Babylonians, declares Yehovah, against those who live in Babylon and against her officials and wise men. A sword against her false prophets. Jeremiah 50:34-36. Yehovah's anger against the shepherds and false prophets of his flock during the time of the end is very well documented in prophecy. I encourage all Yehovah's people to read Ezekiel 34, one of the most descriptive discourses regarding the end-time shepherds. Ezekiel 34 explains where Yehovah's people are to turn when they wake up and realize that they need a new shepherd. Zechariah received a similar message about the end-time shepherds. The idols speak deceit. Diviners see visions that lie. They tell dreams that are false. They give comfort in vain. Therefore the people wander like sheep oppressed for lack of a shepherd. My anger burns against the shepherds, and I will punish the leaders, for Yehovah Almighty will care for his flock. Zechariah 10:2-3. Yehovah's against the prophets. Yehovah also spoke extensively about the false prophets in the time of the end. In Jeremiah and Ezekiel, Yehovah expresses his anger. The false prophets have misused his word, claiming things in his name that he did not say. The prophets thought more of the popular teachings of man than they did of Yehovah's word. These prophecies in Jeremiah 23 and Ezekiel 13 are very descriptive, and I strongly suggest that you read and meditate on what Yehovah is revealing in them. Here are a couple of short passages so you can get an idea of what Yehovah is saying about the false prophets. This is what Yehovah Almighty says. Do not listen to what the prophets are prophesying to you. They fill you with false hopes. They speak visions from their own minds, not from the mouth of Yehovah. They keep saying to those who despise me, Yehovah says, you will have peace. And to all who follow the stubbornness of their hearts, they say, no harm will come to you. But which of them has stood in the counsel of Yehovah to see or to hear his word? Who has listened and heard his word? See, the storm of Yehovah will burst out in wrath, a whirlwind swirling down on the heads of the wicked. Jeremiah 23:16-19. What false hopes is Yehovah speaking of? Could he be referring to the false hope of a pre-tribulation rapture? When Yehovah says that the false prophets tell his people, no harm will come to you, could this also be talking about the pre-tribulation rapture? Or could it be about the false hope that says, once saved, always saved? Once saved, always saved teaching could only be true if it said, once saved, always saved, if saved at the end. You can see why Yehovah is very angry at the false prophets of the time of the end. Because they are leading his people astray. That is why he says, Son of man, prophesy against the prophets of Israel who are now prophesying. Say to those who prophesy out of their own imagination, hear the word of Yehovah. This is what the sovereign Yehovah says. Woe to the foolish prophets who follow their own spirit and have seen nothing. Ezekiel 13:2-3. Their visions are false and their divinations a lie. They say, Yehovah declares, when Yehovah has not sent them. Yet they expect their words to be fulfilled. Have you not seen false visions and uttered lying divinations when you say, Yehovah declares, though I have not spoken? Ezekiel 13:6-7. Notice that Yehovah is telling us that these false prophets are themselves deceived. They expect their lies to be fulfilled. In other words, the false prophets are sincerely deceived. However, the main idea is that they have not heard from Yehovah nor seen in His word what they are proclaiming. This speaks about the pre-tribulation rapture lie because it is something that cannot be found in Scripture. This is another good example of why Yehovah's people must rely on Yehovah and His word as led by His Spirit. We each must seek Yehovah personally because anything else causes us to trust in man, and that is not an option. Yehovah is our shepherd, and we must take refuge in Him alone. It is better to take refuge in Yehovah than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in Yehovah than to trust in princes. Psalm 118:8-9. This is what Yehovah says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who depends on flesh for his strength, and whose heart turns away from Yehovah. Jeremiah 17:5. The time has come to turn to Yehovah in obedience. This title was narrated with virtual voice.